Hello and welcome again to Cloudforest Vibes. So I've got a bunch of plants pulled out to water them, and I got to my Tolumnias and my twig epiphytes, and I figured we'd have a little chat about these guys together. They grow, in essence, the same as most other epiphytes. They have a host of some sort, a tree, or in this case, usually shrubs, low-lying brush, things like that, and they live in symbiosis with these host plants. The difference with the twig epiphytes and a lot of epiphytes is mainly their wet-dry cycle. They do not like to stay wet for very long. They really do not need moss on the mounts or anything like that unless you have a really hot environment. And you really do not want to grow them potted in a media that is going to smother their roots. You'll see a lot of people grow them a lot of different ways. Some people use little clay pots and they just prop the plant up in. They cling on, no issues there. I just saw where Lynn Smith, she mounted a whole bunch of them on the clay mounts. I think they're going to do really well on there for her. They seem to be really effective in a lot of people's environments. I would like to try one of these days. I just got to get my hands on one of the nice ones. Anyhow, I prefer to mount all my I prefer to mount all my twig epiphytes on cork bark with a little bit of sphagnum moss or without. It really depends on the plant. Sometimes it can be very plant specific as to what you want to do with the mount and with the media. So without further ado, let's go through a little bit of a tour here. Let's talk about each plant individually for a few minutes, and then I'm going to show you guys how I feed and water them. And while I do all that, we'll just talk about their care and culture a little bit. So starting here, this is a Comparetia speciosa. This is actually a twig epiphyte. It comes from like a lower cloud forest area. I grow this in the big greenhouse. I have no issues. It's a warm to cool grower. And again, I do have moss on this mount. The roots do not object to it. Coming from a lower cloud forest area, this doesn't mind staying wet for the bulk of the day. But again, by evening time, you do not want this moss to be soggy or wet by any means. A little bit moist is okay. And again, you can see the roots through the moss, so there's really no risk there of smothering them, and they're doing really well. I remounted this very recently, and it's already got roots that are starting to attach to the mount, so that's a good sign. It's happy and it's doing well. To the right, this is Tolumnia tetrapetala. I have a bunch of pictures of this in bloom. I will go ahead and throw one up. I know you've seen this before if you followed some of the earlier videos, but this is a really special little Tolumnia. It's a miniature. It is a Tolumnia species, but it just has really incredible blooms. As you see, this is stick mounted. This is on the same stick I got it on from Andy's Orchids, and it just wraps around. It has a teeny weeny bit of sphagnum moss on there, zombie moss, but all the roots tend to just really grow away from that and really grow into the cracks and crevices and hang down. So there is a remount in that plant's future. It's got a new growth just starting down here. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it has a new growth starting, so I think pretty soon we're going to go ahead and get that off that stick and put it on a nice piece of cork. Let's go up here a little bit. This is one of my Tolumnia hybrids. This is Tolumnia Jerac Firm, I think Jerac Firm Crystal. And it's a beautiful, beautiful red flower. It's a color changer. It has a nice pink margin on it. I did bloom this over the winter time and it was just spectacular. And again, you'll see I had some issues at first. I put a little too much moss on this mount, and all the roots, all of them, grew directly away from that moss, directly onto the mount. This has two real strong, healthy new growths pushing on, tons and tons and tons of roots, and I really expect big things from this plant come this winter. But this moss here really is a novelty. I could take all this off and this plant would be perfectly happy. Right here, another species. This is Tolumnia velutina. And it's a really charming little miniature species again, small. It has a rambling kind of habit, kind of like a vanda, like a mini vanda almost, but it shoots out sometimes flower spikes that form keikis. A lot of the species are very keiki prone. That's how they propagate themselves in the wild. But again, this objected to having too much moss on it. Right now it literally has two little pieces of the zombie moss back there that I just can't get out. They're too intertwined in the roots. But all the roots tend to be growing either aerial or attached to just the bare wood. So if you guys are seeing a trend here, you guys are starting to understand twig epiphytes. So they really do not like their roots to stay moist. So here again, this is a Tolumnia hybrid. This is Girac Flyer Magic. This is a really nice one. It's got yellow flowers. I have a pop-up of this I'll put up as well. And it's just a really great one. Again, smothered in new growths all over, 4 or 5 of them. Roots everywhere. Some of the roots do not mind the moss here, but again, it's such a thin layer that you really don't see too much issues from staying moist for too long. But again, most of the roots have just gone wild. They're growing everywhere, and that is what they do. So they like to ramble, and again, they really like a quick wet dry cycle. Coming down here, we have Tolumnia sylvestre, sylvestre, and this is another species again. I really love my species, and this one grows kind of, like a traditional Tolumnia. It has a clumping growth habit. It's in growth right now. There's a nice new growth right there. Again, tons of roots. This one's a twig epiphyte, but I think I read on orchidspecies.com where this one really does like to grow on like clumps of grasses and things like that. So it doesn't necessarily grow all on twigs. Sometimes it'll grow onto other plants and just cling on. That's just how this is. So if you follow this growth up, you'll see what looks like a flower spike that turned into a keiki, and that got strapped onto this mount, and it's growing roots. It's growing itself a new growth as well, and that is its growth habit. So it might be a little bit of a pain in the butt one day to contain, especially once that top one starts growing, but it's just going to be neat, and I'll just clip them off and put them all over this thing. This whole mount one day hopefully will just be smothered in these little plants. So doing okay. Haven't bloomed it yet, but haven't had it for about a year, and it came in scorched. I mean, it was all this color when it came to me, and I had to really nurse it back to health. So it's really doing well now, and I'm really happy to see this thing thrive and push on. To the right, this is Tolumnia Europhylla. Roger has a beautiful one of these. His looks a whole lot different than mine, but I think his is just a much more mature plant. When I got this, I could tell this was a keiki division. This plant is again one that's very prone to keiki. It has a very long flower spike, and sometimes those spikes produce keikis, and that's how it creeps along and propagates itself as well. So as you see, this one again, it didn't really like the moss. Whatever's left on there again could just come off. It's not a huge fan of it. It likes to grow clung to this wood bare on there. I mean, it's gone around the back, still producing roots. It's a healthy plant. It's got a new growth on this side, and it's got a new growth on this side pushing on really nicely. So two directions of growth. One day hopefully that plant blooms for me, but I just can't seem to get it to bloom at the moment. This plant to the right here, this is a Mysticidum brabone, or brabone. We can look at the tag. Mysticidum brabone. And this is an angraecoid. It's in the Mysticidum alliance, whatever. I don't know if I have that right, but it's a Mysticidum. It's very closely related to Arangus and plants like that. You'll notice I have just a speck of moss on this. The roots are still growing away and in and just going crazy on this little plant. It has a really pretty white flower, little what do you call pendant style blooms. I have an awesome picture of it. It's actually in my intro screen, but I will go ahead and throw a pop-up of that. It should be coming into bloom soon, or spike hopefully if I did anything right, but I haven't seen any signs of it yet. But I'm very hopeful because this one was a real good one. If not, maybe it needs more light or something, because it bloomed shortly after I got it, so I couldn't really take credit for those blooms. But again, that is Mysticidum braybone. And last but certainly not least, this is my only Tolumnia I have in bloom. This is one I got recently from Louisiana Orchid Connection, and it's just awesome. This is Tolumnia calochyla. That's a flower that's just opened up. Right now the sepals on the top, they're still green. This lip is just a gorgeous shade of yellow, and it's got a fringe around the side of it. Hopefully you can see that. But it's a really cool flower. It's got a great fragrance. When the sun hits this flower, it's got a really floral aroma. It's nice. It fills up the whole grow room right now in the morning time with just a beautiful, beautiful scent. And this is, again, a newer one. This is actually a xerophyte, but it grows in the same manner. Its roots do not want to stay wet for any amount of time. I actually grow this a little bit drier than I grow the rest of them. And you know, the bud that it came with obviously stuck in there, so I must have done something right. It likes my environment, and I do treat it and feed it and everything else just the same as I would any other Tolumnia. But that's really it for today. I just wanted to have a chat. These are some of my favorite plants to grow. They're really rewarding. I mean, with blooms like that and some of the other ones we've seen today, they are just awesome. Some other pointers about growing Tolumnias are they really do like a high humidity. They do want 80% or higher. Where they come from, it's typically the islands in the Caribbean, that area, and they get a nice ocean breeze, a humid sea breeze, if you will, and they really do appreciate it and kind of need it to thrive. If you try to grow these plants inside, they're probably not going to do so well unless you have some sort of a system worked out where they're getting some humid air or a humid breeze. They do like a lot of air movement, and they really do need a wet dry cycle. So regards to feeding, they are low feeders. I feed these guys about 80 to 100 parts per million, never more than that, and I do that once a week. I'm feeding them MSU fertilizer right now. I will switch over to Jax in the fall for the fall months to induce them into really nice blooms. I found that really was a good way to give them a boost and harden them up for the winter time. Some of them I have do not really like to get as cool as it gets in here sometimes, but they do pretty well for the most part. They grow well, at least. So other supplements I give them, I'll mix some Epsom salts into their feeds every now and then, once in a blue moon, especially if the leaves start to turn yellow, like with this guy for instance. He's probably going to get some Epsom salts in their feed today or tomorrow, and I will go ahead and take care of that problem. Let's see, I give them Kelp Max at 40 to 60 parts per million, typically on the 40 side, about once every 2 weeks, and I give them CalMag every other watering. I do flush these guys a lot. I'll do a water with clean water, I'll feed them, I'll give them CalMag, and then I'll do another clean water flush in that order. And that's how I grow them consistently throughout the year. I might cut back the feed levels a bit in the wintertime, but that is all I do to adjust it. Temperature-wise, again, I grow them intermediate to warm. That's down to about 57 degrees in the winter and up to about 82 or 83 degrees in the summer. They might get a little bit warmer in the corner there where they get the sun. I'll have to do an experiment where I put a thermometer in there and see exactly what their region gets. I don't have the microclimates down yet, but I know it gets pretty warm in that corner for them, especially when the sun's out. Speaking of sun and lighting, they like high light. Well, this does not. So excluding the Comparetia and the Mysticidum, all the Tolumnias, they like really, really bright light. Some of them can take full sun. I give these guys very, very bright light and full sun as much as they can get. I only get the sun on them for about 3 or 4 hours in the morning, and then they are as high up as they can be towards the 500 watt grow light. So they basically get full sun all day for the most part, and they just thrive. They really like it. I think that just about does it. So what we're going to do is I'll go in here and I'll show you how I water these guys. And again, typically on just a normal watering day, which is what we have today, we're just going to give them a little bit of a spray. I mean, that is all these plants get. A lot of times in the wild, they survive off dew, light rains, and that is basically it. So they do not need a whole lot of water. They have almost a succulent type of leaf that really stores nutrients and water for them, and that is how they survive. That's how they're able to survive with no moss or no moisture, or less moisture than a lot of other plants. So I'll do this in the summer months once a day. I'll go through and give them a quick spray. This guy, he comes from a very arid environment, so he just gets a trickle when he gets it, and that's about twice a week. I do water him a lot less. And then the Comparetia speciosa, I feel whenever it's dry, which it is right now, it gets moistened up, just like the Tolumnias. They all get fed the same as well. The Mysticidum, same story. Whenever I see it's dry, he just gets a quick water, a quick spray. I might do this every day in the summer. Any other season, it would be every other day or maybe every third day in the wintertime, depending on how cold it is and how much they're growing. So that basically wraps up everything I can tell you about Tolumnias that I know and other twig epiphytes. I really hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something today. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them. I love to chat with you guys. I love to answer questions and help you guys out. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you guys and hope you guys are staying safe. I think we're going to go out on this note, because what a better note to go out on. I cannot think of one. It's that dark background. There you go. So stay safe, and until next time, thanks for watching.